Welcome, listeners, to the second official story from Obsidian Quill Publishing TM, where the shadows speak and the truth is buried deeper than fear. If you're new here, thank you for stepping into the dark with us. And if you've returned for more, you already know the pines whisper and the howls are never far behind. Before we begin tonight's chilling tale, a quick word from the crypt. Don't forget to check out our complete series, The Hunt for Dogman, parts 1 through 8, now available in paperback and ebook wherever you buy your stories. And if short, terrifying encounters are more your taste, sink your teeth into creepy cryptid tales, a collection that will leave your lights on long after the final page. We're on a mission to grow this channel to 1,000 subscribers by July, and I can't do it without you. So please, like, subscribe, and share this story with fellow horror lovers, cryptid chasers, and dark fiction fanatics. Every click, every share, every new subscriber helps us keep telling the stories others are too afraid to. Obsidian Quill Publishing TM, born of shadow, inked with power, bound for legacy. A boy in grief, a monster born in silence, a bond no one could believe and no one can break. Ian's Howler. Ian and I had been best friends since the second grade. Our fathers worked side by side at the Millwood Auto Plant in Wexford, Michigan, and we lived right across the street from each other. Every weekday morning, Ian's dad and mine would pile into the same beat-up Ford pickup and head to the factory. Whichever mom wasn't on shift that morning would drop us off at school. Weekends were golden. Either he was at my house or I was at his. We built forts out of old lumber, played flashlight tag in the fields, and traded horror stories we weren't supposed to know. Life felt solid, predictable, even good. But Wexford had its secrets. Millwood might have looked like any other Michigan town, but there's a long, quiet history here of sightings, of strange sounds in the pines, of things bigger than deer crossing the roads at night. Nearly everyone in town has heard a story, or lived one. The local paper doesn't print it, and the sheriff doesn't talk about it, but we all know. The dogmen are real. My dad told me once, real serious, that his great-grandfather, John Rosen Sr., was one of the original lumberjacks who spotted them. Said they were clearing a section of forest when they saw a wolf standing upright, watching them from the trees. He said John Sr. went to his grave telling his sons, "Be careful in those woods at night. I've seen them, those walking wolves, and they ain't myths. They're real, and they're vicious." These stories had been told to us since we were old enough to understand words. Be good, or the dogman will get you. Every kid in Millwood heard it, some bedtime warning wrapped in myth. We laughed them off as kids do. But everything changed the night Ian and I had our first real close encounter. We were 9, camping out in my backyard under a sky full of stars, pretending we were brave explorers. We had flashlights, comic books, and a couple of peanut butter sandwiches. Life was good. But around 2 a.m., we were jolted awake by a sound so loud and guttural it shook the tent fabric. A howl, not like a coyote or wolf. Something deeper, thicker, hungrier. Then came the smell. It hit us like a punch to the face. Rotten, sour, like a mix of wet dog, sweat-soaked gym socks, and something dead. Ian gagged. I nearly threw up. Terrified but curious, we slowly unzipped the tent. The air was thick, the trees silent, and then we saw them. 2 glowing yellow eyes, high up in the branches near the tree line, maybe 50 yards away. Too high for a deer, too still for an owl. We didn't wait to find out. We bolted, bare feet slapping the cold grass. I fumbled for the house keys, heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. The lock fought me every turn. It felt like hours. But we finally threw the door open and slammed it shut behind us, just in time to see it. Through the back window, we saw a massive, hairy silhouette step out of the woods. Tall, upright, ears pointed like a Doberman. It stood there, watching. Almost curious. We ducked under the windowsill and held our breath. Neither of us spoke. After what felt like forever, we peeked. The figure was gone. Vanished back into the tree line like it had never been there. But it had. And from that night forward, we never doubted the stories again. They say change is good, but for my best friend Ian, change came like a wrecking ball. His dad, Thomas Galloway, passed away when Ian was just 10. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. Mr. Galloway had 2 weaknesses, fried food and whiskey. He loved them both, but he loved his family more. Always showed up for Ian's school plays, coached our little league team, and cracked jokes that made us laugh so hard we couldn't breathe. When he died, something in Ian went with him. Ian and his mom were shattered. For months, they slept in our home. My parents took them in without a second thought. My dad missed his best friend. I missed the sound of their laughter echoing from our porch on warm Saturday nights. But the person who changed the most was Ian. He stopped smiling. I mean really smiling. The kind that reaches the eyes and makes your stomach hurt from laughing. That smile was gone the day they lowered his dad into the ground, and it never came back. Not fully, not for a long time. It was the summer before we started junior high when everything changed. That's when Ian's mom, Denise, married Richard Blakey. He was in his early 40s, ex-Marine type, square jaw, crew cut, all about discipline, all about respect. From day one, We didn't like him. My parents thought Denise had lost her mind, marrying someone so fast. They barely knew each other. But Denise was terrified of growing old alone. She and Thomas had been high school sweethearts. She was the head cheerleader, bubbly, and always got by on charm and look. Ian never stood a chance with Richard, not because he was a bad kid. He wasn't. Ian was quiet, respectful, and still grieving. But it was like Richard wanted him gone. Like Ian was the last reminder of a life Denise once had, and Richard couldn't control. Something dark settled into that house after the wedding, and we all felt it. I noticed the effects of Richard on Ian before anyone else did. It started small, like the day Ian asked if I had half a leftover sandwich. He said he hadn't eaten in 2 days. I was shocked. Richard had called him a waste of space, burned him with cigars, threw bottles at him, and said he didn't want to feed another man's kid, and if Ian opened the fridge he was beat with a leather belt. That was the day I told Ian, "Just come eat at my house from now on." And he did. But Richard didn't like that either. He hated when Ian came to our house. Started locking him out of the house or throw water on him in the winter and just say mean things, cruel, sharp things, just to tear him down. And Ian was only 12. I told my dad. At first he tried to handle it like an adult, went over to talk, but it turned into a full-blown fight in our front yard. They were swinging, rolling in the grass, and when my dad got the better of him, the whole neighborhood saw Richard for who he really was, a coward, a blowhard who only picked on people smaller and weaker than him. Still, Ian kept it together. He was strong. You'd never know what was going on behind closed doors because he never let it show. Not even when Richard kept hitting him. I begged Ian to come live with us. My parents would have taken him in, no questions asked. But he refused. Said he wouldn't leave his mom alone with that monster. One night Richard came home drunk and slapped Denise across the face. Ian stepped in, tried to protect her. He was 12. Richard beat him so bad he showed up to school with a black eye and said he fell down the stairs. That was the moment something inside Ian started to break. After that night, Ian changed. He became quiet, withdrawn. He started dressing in all black, stopped making eye contact, stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. It was like he'd gone into some dark corner of himself and locked the door behind him. I caught him once, in the bathroom at school, curled up in a stall, crying so quietly it broke me. I didn't know what to say. I just waited outside until he came out, and we walked home together in silence. I tried to be there for him, but one afternoon, out of nowhere, he looked at me and asked, "You hear about the slaughter at Cadillac Ranch?" I hadn't. He told me. Said someone or something had ripped a calf wide open, left it half-eaten, steaming in the cold morning air. Said it looked like it had been torn apart, not butchered. No blood trail, no tracks. Then he asked, "You think it was the dog man?" I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Sounds like it. But I should have paid more attention to how he didn't smile. Didn't blink, just stared off, like gears in his mind were grinding away at something bigger than me or a dead calf. Something I couldn't see. And I didn't think to ask where those thoughts were taking him. That night, Ian ran away. His mom found the note the next morning. It was short, final. It said, "This life isn't worth living. I told you, it's me or Richard. You chose Richard, so I'm going to join Dad." Ian ran off into the woods. I know because he told me himself later, after it all. Said he didn't run to die, not exactly. He ran to hurt someone who had already hurt him, his mom. He wanted her to feel what he felt, abandoned, replaced, unwanted. He figured if he vanished, maybe she'd finally see what she had done. He went deep into the trees, into that part of Wexford Forest where people say the air itself changes, where sound dies, and even the moonlight seems to hesitate. That's where he waited. Said the smell hit him first. Rank, wet fur and old blood and something worse, something ancient. Then came the silence. Not quiet. Dead silence. The forest had stopped breathing. And then he saw them. Eyes, huge, yellow, burning like coals in the dark. The dog man stepped into the clearing. It was on all fours at first, low, deliberate, and massive. Black fur with streaks of ash gray, thick, sinewy limbs. The dirt crunched under its weight. It was 15 feet away, sniffing the air, watching him. Ian didn't run. He spread his arms wide like he was ready to embrace death. Said he didn't flinch when it growled, didn't cry when it stood up on its hind legs with 2 loud, sickening pops. It loomed above him, 8 feet tall, broad, powerful, and unmistakably female. Her arms hung down past her knees, claws twitching. She stared down at him. Ian closed his eyes. He was done, ready, bracing for the end. She stood over him, breathing deep, and then she leaned down. He felt her cold, wet nose press against his cheek, sniffing. Her growl rumbled like a landslide in her chest. But still, he didn't move. And that confused her. She tilted her head, curious. Then Ian whispered, "What are you waiting for? Kill me." She stepped back. He screamed, his voice cracking open like a dam. "Do it already! I'm a waste of space. I'm worthless. I don't want to be here." And then he dropped to his knees. "I'm not even worth killing. Am I?" He broke. Right there in the mud, sobbing. That's when it happened. This creature, this nightmare, reached out and gently placed one massive clawed hand on his shoulder. Ian swore it was like being touched by grief itself, not pain, not violence, understanding. And in a moment I'll never forget him describing, he leaned forward and hugged it. He buried his face into the thick fur of this monster, and it let out a low, calming growl, like a lullaby from the woods, like something ancient had decided he was worth something after all. Ian emerged from the woods 2 days later. Everyone in town let out a sigh of relief. We'd all heard the howls echoing through Wexford, and we all knew the legends. Most assumed he was lucky to be alive. When the cops questioned him, he claimed he survived by covering himself in foul-smelling mud to mask his scent. Said that's why he reeked so bad. But I knew Ian. He was my best friend. And he was lying. I finally got him alone in his backyard, and that's when he told me the truth. About the dog man, about how she found him, watched over him. He called her Belle, said she'd lost her pup not long before, and that somehow she understood his pain. I'll admit, I didn't believe him, not at first, until he motioned for me to follow him into the woods. We walked quietly through the tree line behind his house, the air thick with pine and shadow. Then he whistled, a soft, specific tone, like calling a dog home. At first, nothing, just silence. Then I heard it, crashing through the trees, fast, heavy, like a freight train wrapped in fur. Then I saw her, 8 feet tall, muscles rippling beneath thick black fur, streaked with gray, rows of jagged teeth, claws like hooked knives. Belle. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. But Ian, he walked right up to her, and she lowered her head and nudged him affectionately. Her tail even wagged. I nearly fainted when he introduced me, and Belle, this towering, walking nightmare, nodded at me. Just like that. Ian promised he'd bring her food, and she turned and disappeared into the trees like a shadow slipping between worlds. After that night, I saw Ian differently. He'd changed. There was something colder in his eyes now. Not angry, not broken, just resolved, unshakable. He didn't flinch anymore, not even when Richard laid into him. Ian stood his ground, calm, silent, defiant. "You're gonna hit me one day," Ian said to Richard, voice flat, eyes dead still. "And you're gonna lose that arm." And Richard, who never backed down from anyone, hesitated. He lowered his fist and muttered, "By the time you're 18, you're out of my house." Ian just shrugged. "Till then, 4 more years of hell." By the time we graduated middle school, Ian was steel. My dad threw a BBQ in our backyard to celebrate. Ian and his mom came. Richard didn't, probably still sore from the beating my dad gave him a while back. I noticed Ian kept slipping plates of food, burgers, kielbasa, away from the party. I caught up to him at the edge of the woods. "Please," I said, "tell me Belle's not here." He just smiled and flipped a bratwurst over his shoulder. We both heard the low, satisfied growls from the shadows, the crunch of teeth on meat. Belle was there all right, and when she gently pushed him with one massive hand to go get more, Ian actually chuckled. I laughed too, but inside, I was terrified. She was wild, dangerous, and yet completely under Ian's spell. And it wasn't until the Baker boys tried to bully Ian that I realized just how powerful that bond really was. It was the fall of our junior year, and the bruises on Ian's arms told stories no one dared ask about anymore. Long sleeves and dark glasses became his armor. Everyone in town knew Richard Blakey was a mean drunk, but the law turned a blind eye. Small-town silence is a dangerous thing. Still, Ian surprised me. Despite everything, he found a way to stay upbeat. He wore T-shirts with werewolf prints, sketching Belle in the margins of his notebook. An 8-foot guardian made of muscle, claws, and loyalty. Most kids thought the drawings were just trauma art from when he ran away. Only I knew the truth. It was lunchtime, and Ian was sitting across from me, guarding his sandwich like it was gold. "You not eating that?" I asked, nodding to the untouched meal. He leaned in close. "It's for her," he whispered, glancing toward the tree line beyond the football field. "Ian, you gotta eat," I said. He smiled faintly. "I'll swing by your house later for dinner. She gets this one." I nodded. That was our thing now. But when Ian stood up to leave, the Baker boys were already circling, Leslie, Kyle, and their cousin Ben, the worst of them. Ben had a record going back to age 9 and had been dumped in Millwood by his parents, hoping a quiet town would change him. It hadn't. He was a venomous snake in human skin, dragging Leslie and Kyle deeper into his pit. "Where you goin', wolf boy?" Ben jeered loud enough for the cafeteria to quiet. Ian barely looked at them. "Anywhere but juvie. That's your zip code, not mine." The jab hit its mark. Ben's smirk faded, his jaw clenched. From that day forward they zeroed in on Ian like a pack of rabid dogs. They tripped him in hallways, dumped his tray at lunch, slapped books from his arms. Some mornings I'd find him with fresh bruises. I tried stepping in once, only made myself a target too. That Friday, Ben cornered us behind the gym after school, eyes burning with hate, teeth clenched like he was holding back a demon. "You think you're smart, huh?" Ben hissed. "I should teach both of you a lesson. Maybe take turns with you." I felt my stomach twist. I looked at Ian, expecting fear, but he just stared at Ben, cold and unmoved. "Aw," Ian said quietly. "You miss your boyfriend from juvie, huh? Sorry, you're not my type." Ben's face turned crimson, his fists clenched. The other boys tensed like hyenas waiting for the Alpha's order. "I'm gonna find you, Galloway," Ben growled. "After school." Ian didn't blink. He just smiled, calm, assured, and terrifying in his own way. "Can't wait." 3 o'clock came. I was shaking. Ian wasn't. He turned to me, voice calm like he didn't have 3 killers waiting for him. "Just stay close. Watch my back. Once we hit the trees, we're safe." I thought he meant we'd lose them on the old hiking trails like we'd always done. God, was I wrong. Ben Baker stepped out from behind the gym like he'd been born in shadows. His eyes were empty, dead. Kyle and Leslie flanked us, boxing us in. Ben sneered. "Shame to ruin that face of yours, wolf boy." Ian grinned, calm, cold, unblinking, then nodded at me. He swung first, a crunching left hook to Ben's jaw. I shoved Leslie and Kyle hard, and we bolted. Behind us, Ben roared like a rabid animal. "I'm gonna kill you." I started to cut left, toward Miller Road, but Ian yanked my arm. "No, not that way. This way." He pulled us deeper into the woods, where the trees grew tighter and the shadows fell like curtains. Ben and the boys chased hard. I could hear their boots hammering the earth behind us. Then Ian stopped, right in a clearing surrounded by twisted oaks and rotting logs. He didn't move. "Ian, we can double back," I whispered. Ian didn't answer. He just stared ahead, waiting. Ben crashed through the brush, sweaty and snarling. "You think you're safe out here?" Kyle and Leslie grabbed Ian's arms, pinning him in place. Ben smiled wide and punched him, once, twice, 3 times, in the gut. I ran to help, but Leslie kicked me in the ribs. I went down coughing blood. I watched, helpless, as Ben grabbed Ian by the hair and leaned in close. "You're my bitch now," he spat. Ian's face was bruised, blood on his lips, and still he smiled. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Meet my bitch." The clearing went dead silent. Then came the sound, low, wrong, inhuman. A growl so deep it rattled my chest like thunder inside bone. "What the hell was that?" Kyle whispered. Ben's face went pale. Crack, snap, crack. Branches snapped like ribs in a vise. She emerged, 8 feet tall, black fur wet with something red, thick muscle beneath her skin, yellow eyes burning like hellfire. Belle. She stood on 2 legs like a monster made of nightmare and rage. Her claws clicked against a rock as she stepped into the clearing. Ben froze. Ian didn't flinch. "I suggest you let me go. She doesn't like anyone hurting me." Ben's hands shook. She? He stammered. Then he shoved Ian away and backed up. Ian stood with his back to Belle and whispered, "Yes, her." Belle sniffed Ian's wounds, a soft growl almost motherly, then turned to Ben, and she screamed. It wasn't just a roar, it was a death song. Then she lunged. Ben didn't even move. Her jaws tore into his throat. I heard the snap of vertebrae, the crunch of teeth through cartilage, the wet sound of blood spraying from a shredded artery. Belle ripped Ben's head clean off, spine and all, and dropped it at Ian's feet. His body twitched. Kyle and Leslie shrieked like children and dropped to their knees, crying, peeing themselves. Belle turned on them, blood dripping from her teeth. She advanced. Ian held out a hand. "No, Belle, leave them." She stopped. Her breath steamed in the cold air, her nostrils flaring. Ian tilted his head. "But leave them something to remember you by." Motioning across his chest, Belle raised one clawed hand. Slash! Her talons tore through their chests, shirts, skin, and muscle. Leslie screamed as blood poured down his stomach. Kyle just collapsed, gasping. "You breathe one word about her or me," Ian said, "and she'll find you. Tell your folks Ben ran away if you know what's good for you." The boys stumbled away, bleeding, sobbing. Ian walked over to me and helped me up. I stared at him, and then at her. Belle stared back. Her yellow eyes met mine, and she nodded. Then she vanished into the woods. I never lied to my parents growing up, not once. But that night, when we came home looking like we'd been through a war zone, I lied. Maybe it was to protect my friend. Maybe it was because I was terrified of what he'd become. Or maybe I was afraid of what loved him. When my mom asked what happened, I said we were just playing football and things got a little rough. She didn't question it. She gave Ian a plate to go, assuming that bastard Richard was starving him again. But I knew better. I couldn't stop seeing Ben's severed head lying on the forest floor. Couldn't unhear the sound of his vertebrae cracking like dry branches. I barely touched my food. The next morning, police showed up at Ian's house. The Baker boys had gone to the cops, but their story sounded like it came straight out of a horror movie. A giant wolf woman, 8 feet tall, decapitating their cousin. No one bought it. Ian stayed calm, eerily calm, and told the officers Ben had pulled a knife on him and tried to rob him. In the struggle, Leslie and Kyle managed to cut each other, and this aggravated Ben. He said Ben got mad, said something about being too smart to be related to those idiots, and took off alone toward the train tracks. The police shrugged and left. Case closed. The Bakers were told to leave Ian alone. And Ben? He was found days later, dead on the tracks, decapitated. The story was he'd fallen and been hit by a train, a tragic accident. Ian's version of events won. I didn't talk to him for a few days after that. Not because I hated him. I just needed time. But Ian's luck wasn't that great back then because Richard snapped again. This time was different. Worse. He was drunk, screaming, hitting Ian's mom repeatedly. Ian jumped in to defend her, but Richard punched him hard, knocking him onto the lawn near the woods by his house. My dad and I saw it happen and rushed over to help, but Richard pulled a pistol. "You step 1 foot closer and I'll kill you all," he shouted. "I'll claim self-defense." The gun was aimed right at my father's head. Ian got up slowly, bleeding from his mouth, his face bruised, and stood between the barrel and my dad. His eyes locked on mine. This time I nodded. Ian turned to Richard and said, voice like steel, "Today's the day you lose that arm." Richard laughed. "You little punk, I'm gonna enjoy this." He raised the pistol to Ian's head. Then the trees exploded. A black blur shot out of the brush, a living missile of fur, muscle, and rage. Belle. She hit Richard with the force of a wrecking ball, one clawed hand gripping his wrist, the other slamming into his shoulder. Snap. Crack. His arm tore clean off. The gun flew, still clutched in his severed hand, landing 10 feet away. Richard let out a guttural scream, not of pain, but pure terror, as he stumbled, blood pouring in thick spurts from the torn socket. My dad gasped. Denise collapsed in tears. And I couldn't move. Belle stood there, breathing hard, blood soaking the fur around her mouth and claws. She turned to Richard, who was now on his knees, sobbing, begging. Ian stepped forward. He looked down at the man who had tormented him and his mother for years, looked him in the eye and said, "No more. All those years you made me feel like crap. All those years you starved me, beat me, and drove me from my home. No more." His voice was shaking. Ian was angry, and it was coming out. "Your arm is mine," he said, "but your ass is hers." Then quietly, like giving an order to an old friend, "Get him." What happened next wasn't a killing. It was a reckoning. Belle tore into Richard with such brutality and precision. It was like she'd been waiting for this moment. She ripped through him, limb by limb, his blood painting the porch, the siding, the flowers his mother planted last spring. Denise turned her head. My dad looked away. But Ian watched. I watched. Because some people, like Richard, aren't meant to be buried peacefully. When she was done, Belle dragged what was left of Richard into the woods. A trail of blood smeared behind her like a signature. Minutes later she returned, calm, composed, eyes still glowing, and stopped beside Ian. He looked up at her, and she lowered her head. He stroked her fur like you would a beloved pet, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. "Ian and I are still friends today," We both have families of our own now, had good jobs, houses, grand kids, and retired the whole shebang. Ian and I grew up but never grew apart. He doesn't live across the street anymore. He lives 15 minutes away by car near the edge of the woods. Says it's for Belle. Said she needed space, peace, safety. She died a few years ago, but we still talk about her. Our grandkids don't believe the stories. They laugh and roll their eyes. Then we show them the photo. It's us on graduation day, me, Ian, and Belle in the woods. She's got on a graduation cap, and I swear to God, she's smiling.